Alright guys, what's up? It's the Ascension of Babylon. What we do here is we talk about the occult, we talk about spiritual self-development, and we talk about the healing process. If that's your thing and you are not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I will be posting very consistently. And if you're in resonance with what I'm sharing today, let me know by slamming that like button. And what we're going to be talking about in today's video is initiation through the Sephiroth, or what most people know as the Tree of Life. So my last video was speaking about the Qliphoth, and I wanted to start with the Qliphoth because the Qliphoth is actually the roots of this, and this is something that's taught a little bit more now by those of us that actually have hands-on experience working with this, but there's still a big misconception about what this is and the roots of what this is. So the roots of the Tree of Life are going to be the Tree of Death. And even though we use the terms Tree of Life and Tree of Death, they are two polarities of the same thing. And that same thing is the God energy, or what we can call the source energy, choosing to experience itself in the form of polarity. The Tree of Life represents the structuring and ordering principles of the created cosmos, and it is the created cosmos itself. The Tree of Death, at its very core, is the void that all of that comes in. It is the void that this entire tree actually floats in, and it predates the cosmic laws, the ordering principles, and the created cosmos in general. So we have the Tree of Death, which is the unmanifest, and we have the Tree of Life, which is anything that becomes manifest from that unmanifest space. We have the primordial chaos, and then we have the forces of order that govern the cosmos so that evolution can take place in a proper and in a healthy way, giving all life within the created universe and the created cosmos in general the chance to evolve in a way that is sustainable for the evolutionary process of each being in existence. So when you're looking at this right here, you can think the ordering principles, you can think cosmic law, and you can think the force that, even though we're not necessarily always seeing it, the force that is responsible for holding the cosmos together. And when we're talking about the Qliphoth, we're talking about infinite potential and infinite probability that hasn't necessarily taken form yet in the form of what we're looking at right here. This is a representation of the created cosmos. And it also represents our connection to the created cosmos, because we are the created cosmos, because we are God experiencing itself temporarily through the human vehicle in the physical reality experience. So, getting all of that out of the way, this right here is a diagram of you. Each archetypal pathway, so you see all these different pathways that connect the spheres. Each archetypal pathway represents an aspect of your energetic structure and an aspect of the collective unconscious. And each sphere, which are known as the Sephiroth, each sphere actually is directly connected to our chakra system. And going back to the ordering principles, the chakra system is what links us into the ordering principles of the cosmos itself. So I'm going to I'm going to run through these connections really quick. So Malkuth is associated with the root. Yesod is associated with the sacral chakra. Hod and Nedzak together is associated with the solar plexus. Tifereth is associated with our heart. Hesed and Gebura is associated with the throat. Bina and Chokmah is associated with the third eye. And Kether is associated with our crown energy center or our crown chakra. So when you're initiating through these spheres, you are also stimulating the chakra system itself. So as you're working through these spheres, you are also working through each one of the chakras. You are, we can say, balancing them and activating them to a deeper degree than they were activated before you started the initiatory process, all the way up to your crown. And then there is a balancing process that takes place as you ground all of that initiatory momentum back down the tree. So the way we typically start the initiatory process is right here in Malkuth. We will usually ritualistically open up the sphere of Malkuth, and then we can ritualistically open all these other spheres if we want to. But what I've also found is that once you start the process at the bottom, it can just flow naturally, and you will experience all of these different spheres to the degree, that you are able to process them, and you will flow naturally without having to control the process or always structure it or ritualize it. You will flow naturally up this tree. So once again, you are going from the root to the crown, from Malkuth to Kether, and then all of that evolutionary momentum that you create during the time you're moving up the tree eventually gets grounded back down the tree. And we see this illustrated right there. So hopefully you can see it. I'm pretty sure you can. So that little lightning pattern that you see is how it is said in Kabbalah that energy flows down from the source. So you're actually moving up the tree in a very similar way, and then you are moving back down the tree in the way that energy is descending from Kether to Malkuth, which is the physical plane. Now, each one of these spheres is going to be governed by a planetary energy. So Malkuth, of course, is governed by Earth. It represents Earth. Yesod, the moon. Hod, Mercury. Nedzak, Venus. Tifereth, the sun. Gebura, Mars. Hesed, brain fart, oh my gosh. Jupiter. Bina, Saturn. Chokmah, Neptune, but this can also be different depending on tradition, and Kether, Pluto. And I believe that's interchangeable as well. There's some people that may utilize another planet in connection with Kether, but I experienced Neptune in Chokmah, and I experienced Pluto in Kether, and this is also consistent with the experiences of a lot of people that initiate into this Kabbalistic system. So there are going to be experiences that manifest in relation to what these different planetary energies are representing. So for instance, when it comes to Yesod, you might manifest experiences that will require a deeper self-reflection as well as an emotional processing, because these are things that are associated with the moon. When you're in Hod, you might have social connections and experiences with people that require you to think, that require a level of intellect and mental capacity, and maybe even strategy, because it has to do with the mind. When you're in the sphere of Gebura, this is ruled by Mars, so there may be very fiery, kind of intense experiences that manifest that require the usage of a lot of energy, or maybe some type of even stress or strain that potentially manifests, and so on and so forth. Hesed might involve some type of expansion that is taking place within the body, the emotional body, the mental body, and of course in your physical life, you may see that expansion taking place. Bina can have a lot to do with like limitations and restrictions. It's like you're being held inside of this womb, and it's almost like you're not allowed to leave this space until you process what you need to in that sphere, so on and so forth. So these planetary energies are going to manifest in a very tangible way, so you can understand the overall planetary layer of consciousness that governs that sphere, and then so eventually you can utilize that planetary energy in a conscious way that benefits your evolutionary process and that is aligned with your higher self and what you need to experience from present moment to present moment. Now these spheres are also governed by archangels. So I'll just name a few. Malkuth would be Archangel Sandalphon. Yesod would be Gabriel. Hod, Michael. Tifereth would be Raphael. Gebura would be Kamael. I forget who governs Hesed. I know Archangel Metatron governs Kether. And I think Raziel governs Chokmah. I forget the rest off the top of my head, but you get the point. They are governed by different archangels. Now, what these archangels actually are is they are these multi-dimensional fields of energy that represent the structuring and ordering principles of the cosmos itself and of the universe. So when you're working with these forces, there is not only a structuring that's taking place, but a simultaneous restructuring that also has to happen. And this is actually when you can interact with the darker polarity of angels. So I think when a lot of people think about angels, they think love and light and support and all that stuff. But there is a darker polarity that you are going to experience when you are interacting with these multi-dimensional fields of energy. Even though angels are associated with the structuring and ordering principles of the universe and of the cosmos, remember that we evolve through paradox. So when you're interacting with an angel that represents those structuring principles, you are also going to experience to some degree its opposite. And once again, this is when we interact with the darker polarity of angels that most people are not necessarily aware of, because modern day spirituality paints angels to be like all love and light, but they can absolutely be quite intense and they can absolutely be quite destructive. But that destruction is actually a part of a reordering process, in that dissolving destructive energy, we're actually pulling it into our bodies when we're doing different ritualistic invocation practices with these archangelic forces as we are working through the spheres that they actually govern. So as human beings, we create a false order within ourselves, and therefore we create a false order within our lives. So we do this with relationships. We attach to people that aren't healthy and that aren't really healthy for us and that we idealize in different ways. And this is just a part of us that is operating from a space of false order that wants to keep us away from emotions that are in connection with early childhood trauma and in connection with even ancestral or intergenerational trauma that we come into the world to inherit. And because we are taught that the energies and or emotions that are connected to that are not safe to feel, we have to create a protective program. So a part of our psyche actually steps up. It creates this protective program, and this is when we have addictions. This is when we have certain attachments. This is when we idealize relationships and we overly seek for someone else's approval outside of the self, because it's meant to keep us away from parts of us that are holding the energetic resonance of not feeling whole and complete on their own, and are, feeling very abandoned and just not good enough in general. Even though we can be quite good at bypassing all of those emotions and then creating an external reality to bypass those things, this external reality even gives us, or we can say stimulates, a chemical release in the body that actually helps us, bypass those emotions. Those energies are always inside of us, and even if we can bypass them for quite a long time, they're still going to manifest in our reality. So betrayal, heartache, financial problems, maybe a midlife crisis is what happens. Whatever it might be is the result of that suppressed negative energy that's inside of us that we are running away from, and we are creating a false internal and external order around to not feel what is actually going on inside. So when we're connecting with these angels, they can see how we are operating in a way that is not truly desirable for our soul to experience. So there's things that are going to take place, experiences and trials and tribulations that they will initiate into your life, and that are also just the natural byproduct of pulling that higher frequency or higher dimensional energy into your field. And these trials and tribulations might shake things up a little bit. They might challenge certain relationships, challenge the job that you work at, cause different forms of physical catalyst, rupture, and upheaval to manifest. So you actually have an opportunity to see that the order that you created within your life was never actually truly sustainable and was never authentic to who you truly were. This is the point of the trials and the tribulations that I'm speaking about. And angels can sometimes have a very destructive way of initiating these kinds of changes. And I've made videos about this before, but I'll briefly just speak on it. Not only have I been through some pretty heavy catalysts working with angels, but I've also seen people as well get completely fucked up, and they end up telling their story about how they summon an angel and they didn't really expect this to happen, but over like a period of 6 months or a year, their life just gets completely flipped upside down, and they're kind of sitting there scratching their head like, what the fuck? Why is this happening? This isn't what I intended. But then a year later they realize, oh, I needed this to happen. That angel was just able to see all of these things that were in the way of, what I truly wanted to manifest, or in the way of me living the life that was truly fulfilling and desirable to me, not just on an ego consciousness level, but on a deeper soul level, more importantly. But it took the person quite some time to actually see that's actually what they needed. So yes, angels are absolutely connected to the structuring and ordering principles within the universe. However, they will initiate you by paradox, and you will experience the negative polarity and the negative destructive qualities of these angels when there are parts of you and there are parts of your life experience that need to be reordered, and maybe you wouldn't actually be willing to let go of those aspects of your life if it wasn't for this almost forced evolution that takes place when you're interacting with the negative polarity of these angelic beings. So I do want you to understand that about angels and just Sephirotic initiation in general. Even though initiating through the Sephiroth is associated with positive energy, positive does not mean good, and it doesn't necessarily mean feeling good all the time or anything like that. You can think of some of these angels as being like a bright light or something like that, and that light will shine on all of the areas of yourself and the shadow aspects of self that you were running away from prior to going through this initiatory process, and that can be very, very uncomfortable. So not only will these angelic energies manifest in the form of tangible, physical trials and tribulations that take place in your social life, take place at work, take place, wherever they need to take place, but in your life in general, but so are the planetary energies, and as well just the spheres in general, because when you're working with the spheres, you are also working with your chakras, and you are uprooting the blockages that are keeping you from operating as a unified field of awareness. So if you're getting into this Kabbalistic initiatory system with a lot of blockages, and it's likely that you probably are if you're just beginning, well, those things are going to need certain triggers for you to become aware of them, and for them to kind of be uprooted from your body and from your energetic structure in general. And the way these triggers can manifest will absolutely be in physical form. So there will be a lot of physical experiences that shift your mental and emotional state to be more in alignment with how your soul truly wants to experience itself through the physical body. Now, as you're raising yourself through this Kabbalistic tree, sphere by sphere, you're also raising the kundalini energy as well. Even if you do not associate kundalini energy with Kabbalistic initiation, you are raising the kundalini energy. Because keep in mind what I said in the beginning of the video, this is a representation of you. So as you're raising yourself through the tree by working with these different spheres, as well as the archetypal pathways as well, you're raising the kundalini energy through all of the different chakras that are associated with all of these different spheres. And you are doing this from the root all the way up to the crown, because that's how kundalini functions. Once the energy starts raising, the purpose is for the energy to raise itself through all of the chakras, up the spine, and, into the crown itself. Now, in relation to these archetypal energies, getting into that, you will also be experiencing those in ways that can be very tangible if you're receptive to what is happening. And I would say it can get a little more challenging when you get to the middle of the tree, because this is when you work through the archetype of death, which is a very dissolving energy that can kind of force us to let go of certain identities and belief systems and relationships that we might have been attached to. And there's also the archetype of the devil. And these archetypes will actually show up in people at times. So to give you like an example, maybe a couple, depending on how this flows. So in relation to the archetype of the devil, I had this show up when I was going through some pretty difficult family problems, things that were really hard to go through, and people were actually taking on the energy of the devil. And what does the devil actually represent? It represents how we've made an enemy out of ourselves. It represents addictions, vices, negative personality traits, and different wounded aspects of ourselves that, are existing in our, resonating, we can even say, with our nervous system. So these traumas store themselves in our body, and these parts of ourselves actually exist in our energetic field. So the devil can represent these different wounded, neglected, exiled parts of us, the parts that we don't want to take ownership of because maybe they project negative personality traits that are not socially accepted, and we don't want to be seen in that way. And it can represent the wounded parts of us that will drive us to even create those negative personality traits that sometimes we want to try to hide away from the world because it's not socially acceptable. So I was starting to see these things in myself more and more when I was experiencing the archetype of the devil. And as I was going through all of these different family problems where people were demonizing me, projecting onto me, and, having conflict with me and things of that nature, I noticed that this archetype showed up in a person on the internet, basically as I was just thinking about how I was experiencing that archetypal pathway of the devil. And there was this person, she stitched a post that I made about like the music industry, and she just started freaking out and bugging out and saying that, I didn't know what I was talking about and blah, 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 and how dare I? I mean, she was absolutely going off the handle, not even knowing who I am. She didn't even give what I was saying a chance. She just, was basically bugging out. But her name, and this is the point of how these energies can manifest in tangible ways, her name was something Diabla. And of course, Diabla, or even Diablo, is associated with the concept and the archetype of the devil. So as I'm going through all of these different problems in my life, in the online space, it even manifested in the form of a person who took on that archetype, and I attracted somebody, of that nature who was kind of coming at me in a very adversarial way. I attracted someone that just so happened to have devil in their name. Now there was another experience I went with, and that I went through. I think I'm talking a little too fast here. Maybe we should slow it down. Okay, so there was another experience that I went through where the archetype of death actually showed up in my energy field. So I was already kind of still going through these different family problems and things of that nature. I was working through a lot of fear and anxiety and even self-doubt and things of that nature that death energy was bringing up, so I could be present with it and I can process it. So just a little backstory before I continue. There are times, and I've posted pictures of this stuff, where I will just be intuitively led to take a picture of myself in the glass sliding door. And I've caught giant orbs and things coming out of my energy field and all types of stuff that people who don't even really believe in what I'm speaking about now have seen, and they've been like, yeah, you can't make that up. So just to kind of explain the nature of how real some of these experiences actually are that I've been through. So one day, I don't remember what called me to do it, but I just had this intuitive thought that I should take a picture of myself once again in that sliding glass window. And sure enough, I did, and there was a skull over my face. You can literally see this skull just kind of overlaying with my face. And that was the energy of death showing up as I was experiencing that archetypal pathway of death, and I was already going through this deeper dissolving process that was giving me more of a capacity to actually be who I truly was at a core foundational level. Now, talking about death, this brings us into the abyss. So, there are different thresholds that you cross on the Kabbalistic tree, but we're not going to talk into all those. We're not going to talk about all those thresholds. But there's one above Malkuth. There is one above Hod and Netzach. There's the abyss, which is what we're going to be talking about, and then there's another threshold or a veil above Bina and Chokmah, separating those spheres from Kether. But we're only going to be covering the abyss in this video. So the abyss is a major threshold that you have to experience, push through, and ultimately cross to actually access the higher states of awareness that are symbolized by the top of the Kabbalistic tree. And the reason why that is because your nervous system has to be properly attuned to experience the top of the Kabbalistic tree that actually symbolize our upper chakras. So that's going to be our third eye and our crown. But we can't actually, connect with those chakras in a long-term, sustainable way if we haven't dissolved the veil that is separating our conscious mind from our unconscious mind, where our power and evolutionary potential is truly existing. The entire blueprint of all of creation exists within the unconscious because we are God experiencing itself through a physical body. So that means that God energy or that source energy connection is in the unconscious in its rawest, most primal, purest form. But to start accessing the pure essence of the source or of God, we also have to start connecting with other aspects of the unconscious, aspects of the shadow self that we have neglected. And this is what happens when we're in the abyss. We get an opportunity to connect and to embody our power and evolutionary potential in a major way moving forward, but only by processing these different wounded shadow aspects of self that we have probably been neglecting for a very long time. And even if we haven't been neglecting them, they still probably carry enough of a trauma-based charge to interfere with our ability to start operating from and accessing the powers of the upper chakras that are symbolized by Bina, Chokmah, and Kether, the spheres that are on the other side of the abyss. So when you're going through the initiation of this crossing, you are going to be confronted by a being known as Shugal. And Shugal is one half of the beast of 666. The other half is Karanzan. And then we have Shugal. Each one is symbolized by the numbers 333. Together, they make up the beast of 666. Now, the beast of 666 is everything we have rejected and disowned within ourselves. So it's the negative personality traits that we formed to survive our trauma, and it's the parts of us that are holding and carrying onto the emotional resonance of that trauma itself. So it is the parts that we utilize to bypass, and it's the parts that we have bypassed. And this is what Shugal is going to be a personification of, and is also a personification of the power and potential that we haven't owned, and even suppressed aspects of us that are not just connected to trauma, but are connected to the reptilian brain, are connected to the inner predator, and are just connected to the more primal aspects of human nature itself. This is what you're going to be confronted with when you go into the abyss. And when you process enough of this, this is when you can actually move into Bina. And then from Bina, you go into Hokmah, and then from Hokmah you go into Kether, and then when you process enough of the experiences that manifest as a result of moving into Kether, then all of that evolutionary momentum that you created going up the tree grounds back down the tree and into the physical body. And this is a rewiring as well of the way that your nervous system was previously functioning. So before this, your nervous system was wired to support negative identities and negative personality traits that are not in resonance with who you really are, all to bypass these other more sensitive, vulnerable, wounded parts of you that are causing your nervous system to resonate at a very low frequency, and it's causing your nervous system to operate in what we can call a very damaged way. So now you're at this point where you're able to rewire the way your nervous system operates so you can form belief systems and identities, and then of course create life experiences that are in resonance with your higher self and the God consciousness in general. Now, in relation to the higher self, Sephirotic initiation is designed to connect you to your higher self. And even after Kether, there are actually deeper levels of initiation that can unfold that bring you into the raw and unregulated aspects of your higher self that can be very hard to comprehend, because even though the higher self is still connected to the different structuring and ordering principles of the cosmos, the higher you move up into the positive polarity of the Sephiroth, the more, I think the word is intangible, the more hard to hold on to, and the more unregulated the higher self energy actually becomes. Just imagine your higher self raw, unregulated, and without a filter. So you actually move into a deeper initiatory process when your soul is ready to start integrating these raw, primal, unregulated aspects of the higher self. And this is something that can happen in Ein Sof Or, Ein Sof, and Ein. And these are these very liminal void spaces of reality that you're working with. I think that's everything that I wanted to cover. I covered the spheres. I talked a little bit about the archetypal pathways. I talked about the experience of connecting with the archangels. I talked about the abyss. Yeah, I think that is everything that I wanted to cover in this video. If you watched this all the way to the end, thank you so much for being here, and I'm gonna see you in the next video.